Hello, and welcome back to the Cellblock Scorch. Cricket here to record week 37. The prompt was given by Grishmak, and it was, "There was light in their eyes." My piece uses characters I had used before in the Scorch. This is the first time I won with them, so unless you've been on the Patreon, you haven't met these people before. I do think it should stand alone pretty well, so I'm not going to jump too much more into that. I really like the little world I've created here, so my piece is titled Neid's First Tapestry. You want to hear another tale of the children of the origin and the end? Very well then, let's see. It was a rare day that all 9 members of that family were at home. If Finn was not gone hunting, then his wife Uri was communing with nature. Sometimes their oldest children, Stolz, Luxor, and Zorn, were shopping in nearby villages. Finn and Uri often traveled farther, too, to distant lands, as was necessary. But on this day, all 9 of them were home. Now this day was an important one. The youngest child, Neid, was turning 7, which meant she was old enough to weave. She had watched for years as her older siblings sat at their looms, weaving what to her seemed to be the very fabric of reality. She had fetched thread and sorted colors, carded wool, and discarded scraps for as long as she could remember, but never could she weave. The last 2 years had been especially agonizing since Perez had started weaving, leaving her alone to watch. Stolz, Luxor, and Zorn were excellent weavers, but it was Donshoku, Donyoku, and Pares that she really loved to watch. The twins worked seamlessly together, passing the shuttle back and forth, trading colors in and out effortlessly, somehow running 3 different looms between the 2 of them. Neid never could understand how they kept 3 separate pictures straight, but their tapestries were always flawless. Pares worked slowly and deliberately, and although he'd only been weaving for 2 years, he was already completing the most complicated images. Neid loved to see the way his fingers ran over the threads, shuttle flying as the scenes came to life. His tapestries almost seemed to breathe when they were finished. And today, finally, it was her turn to weave. Neid had woken up before dawn, and had been sitting in the main room where all the looms were, staring at the tapestries, organizing shuttles and thread, and just breathing in the feel of the room. As the sunlight came slanting in through the window, Neid could see the dust specks dancing through it, and she thought she could almost feel magic humming in the air. I've spoken too much of Neid. Oh no, Sati, for this story is hers. Don't worry, the rest of the family will gather soon. Hush. Soon enough, the whole family had gathered in the weaving room. Stolz and Luxor couldn't help but smile when they saw Neid standing in the middle of the looms, nearly bursting with excitement. She stared at the loom their father had finished for her just the day before, not quite daring to touch it. "Well, my Neidchen," Finn said with a smile, "are you ready to weave?" She nodded enthusiastically. "First, there is a story to tell." He sat down, and all the children followed, gathering around their father. "Since the dawn of the world, the end and the origin have stitched the tapestries of time, recording the doings of the human race and the events that will befall them. The future is not determined by the end and the origin, but they know what will occur, what has occurred, what is occurring. So the origin and the end weave the tapestries of time, as they always have and as they always will." The children sat, spellbound, as their father told the story he had told 5 times before, on the days of the other children's first weaves. Their mother took over then. But as time passed, the burden of the warp and the weft became too great for the origin and the end. The doings of humanity were myriad, and it became apparent that someone new would have to help them weave the tapestries of time. So they found a child. Neid caught her breath, waiting to hear what they said next. This was the only place the story ever varied. Finn and Uri spoke in unison. a child who possessed all the kindness it would take to watch over humanity and weave the tapestries of time, and they asked her if she would help them. They paused, looking expectantly at Neid. "And she said yes!" Neid shouted, leaning forward. Finn chuckled at her enthusiasm, and Uri stood, extending her hand to her daughter as she said, "Then accept your first loom, child, and weave." Uri helped Neid set up the loom and begin moving the shuttle across the threads slowly and surely. The first thread Neid selected was a deep emerald green, and she felt an unfamiliar swelling in her chest as she began to weave. "But Modir," she asked, passing the shuttle carefully under her mother's guiding hand, "how will I know what to weave?" "Time will tell," Uri said, laughing gently. "Do as you feel, Neidchen." A few more moments Neid wove, in deep concentration, until suddenly an image began to take shape in her soul, and she knew exactly what the tapestry would be. There was a meadow somewhere, with a girl in it, a girl with a shining blonde braid, and she was important. As Neid's first tapestry began taking shape, her siblings moved to their own looms. Soon Donshoku and Donyoku's shuttles were flying across their 3 looms, as Paras carefully switched the thread in his shuttle from black to a shining sky blue. Neid saw Stolz from the corner of her eye, as he too began a tapestry. Luxor and Zorn were in the middle of theirs, with a few days yet of work on them. Somehow, as Neid passed the shuttle across the loom, she felt more connected to her family than she ever had before. A feeling settled over her, the feeling that they were creating something big as the world. Finn and Uri stood back watching their children weave. Finn had one arm around his wife, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You know, Elskan," she said, "we'll have to tell them soon. Everything." "I know, Maest Vinur, I know. But look at them. Not yet. The burden it will lay on their shoulders." He shook his head. The truth of their identities was indeed something they would have to share with their children. For now, though, let them weave. The 7 children of Finn and Uri sat and stood at their looms, weaving in a synchrony that could not be rehearsed. Magic thrummed in the air around them, although Finn did not think any of them had noticed it yet for what it was. The eternity of their souls shone in their faces, their eyes almost glowing their peculiar colors. The red of Zorn's eyes and the yellow of Donyoku's were particularly striking. "You feel that, Astvanor?" Finn nicked his head in the general direction of the looms. "Already the time slips away through them." "Yes, love, I know." Uri took his hand, moving towards their own empty looms. "And I think," she said, "it is time for us to weave as well." Ooh, that was good. I like that. So this is a family of weavers. The girl that Neid pictures when she's weaving her first loom is a girl named Un, and she is actually the protagonist of the first story I wrote about this group, which was for week 28, when Peishi prompted us with a picture of the beach at night and also the 7 deadly sins. So this family is inspired by that idea of the 7 deadly sins. Each of the children represents one. They're named in a handful of languages after the sins. And the weaving is important. Perhaps the myth that their parents tell is not so mythical. Perhaps it is a current thing about what their family is doing and why it's so important that they're weaving all the time. But hey, that's not important. What's important is Neid gets to make a tapestry finally. I think the tag we have for these on Patreon is weaving time. Something like that. Yeah, I really like this story. I wrote a bunch of them in that first year, 2 years probably, and honestly I should get back to them because I like them and I have a cool vision for the overarching story in my head. It's kind of like Nordic inspired. The language that comes up a couple times when people are like using terms of endearment for each other is, I chose Icelandic. And that's not any of the languages that any of the characters are named in. I was just kind of wilding there. I feel like diving back into this, I might handle like naming all the characters differently, do some other things, get better at Icelandic pronunciation if I'm serious about that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this story. I was really delighted that Grishmak picked it for the win this week. My prompt for the next week. You know, starting this whole project is a learning experience, right? The writing contest for funsies. And this prompt is one that I would definitely do differently if I did it now. I had a couple prompts early on that I was like, I gave too much. I realized, like, thinking about it later, I was like, I should cut the prompt off. So the prompt that I gave, and it's definitely one I found on, it was like a writing inspo, writing prompts account somewhere on the internet. The prompt is, my friends never believed me when I told them that the diminutive ito found in the word mosquito implies that there must have once been a larger creature, until today. The sky darkened as the legendary creature El Mosco descended and... ... That's where the prompt ends. It's fun. It's a little silly. I definitely think if I was giving the prompt now, I would probably stop about halfway through when it's just like, probably after until today. And then they can do whatever they want with it. But I got some good, interesting pieces, and I hope you look forward to that. Keep those fires burning.
The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellarcore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. We can be reached at thestellarcore@gmail.com, through comments on your podcast platform of choice, our Instagram, Stella_core, and at our YouTube, also called Stellarcore. Follow Cellblock Scorch Podcast on Instagram, or the Cellblock Scorch on Tumblr to see the prompt the day before the episode drops and a quote from each Scorch the day after, with flavor commentary from Red, our social media manager. Feel free to check out our other productions on our YouTube channel or our cosplays on Instagram. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon, linked in the show notes. There, you can access the Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to our Embers as well.